Welcome, I'm Paul, this is Dave. Today I have 19 Glitch in the Matrix stories, supernatural, and creepy stories for you. Let's hit it. Case file number 2039, written by Throw Away. The Hudson Valley's Secret Portal. I was taking a trip with my then girlfriend, and we had to cross the Hudson River to get to where we were going. There are only a handful of bridges across, and I know them all from having grown up in the area. On that particular trip, we were supposed to take the Bear Mountain Bridge, but I got off the wrong exit and passed it. We decided it wasn't a big deal. The next bridge, the Newberg Beacon, was actually closer to where we were going. It would just bring us over a little bit past our destination, but not enough to really matter. So we kept on driving, not really paying specific attention to where we were, since it was probably 20 or 30 minutes until we got there. Well, we never crossed the Newberg Beacon that day. We also never crossed Bear Mountain. And we certainly didn't drive an extra half an hour to the mid-Hudson, or turn around and go back to the tap. When we did take a minute to check where we were, and how close the bridge was, we found we were already on the other side of the river. No bridge. We were just already there. So either there's a secret tunnel somewhere under the river, we had our memories erased, or we found some kind of spatial rift somewhere in the Hudson Valley. Case file number 2040, written by RazBB, The Briefs Encounter of the Frightful Kind. 3 months or so ago, I was on a long stretch of nothing country road outside of Folsom, California. Probably 2 a.m. if I had to guess. Maybe an hour since I had seen any sign of life. Pitch black and one lane running in each direction. I had kind of a weird vibe and started to space out about it, as my truck started to drift to the right a little, not paying any attention. A middle-aged, overweight, and bald man ran out of the bushes from my left. He was wearing nothing but his generic, whitey-tighty type underwear. He was screaming at the top of his lungs, running directly at me. Like running from the side, trying to jump in front of my car. He slapped the front of my truck with his hand as I blew past him at 50 miles per hour. I had my brights on, but he somehow still held crazy eye contact with me from the time he became visible, up until he disappeared in my mirror. I called my cousin, who was behind me for a few minutes in the U-Haul, to ask if he saw him. He said the guy just stood motionless in the other lane, only moving to turn his head and hold eye contact. We agreed there was absolutely nothing we could do, as neither of us had anywhere for him to sit, had no idea where we were ourselves, hadn't seen a town or a parked car for over an hour, and had no means to defend ourselves against him, the trap he was setting, or who he was running from. It would probably be another 45 minutes until we saw any other sign of civilization. I had kept my eyes on the local news sites for a few days after, and didn't see anything. It seemed extremely supernatural. It's probably important to note that while he seemed absolutely terrified, it wasn't a run in front of the car 100 yards down the road, please help me type deal. The dude came out of fricking nowhere at the last second, screaming like a banshee. Had I not been distracted and started to veer right, he would have ran directly in front of my truck. Case file number 2041, written by Anonymous. The Newbie's Nightmare, Nature's Snare. Okay, in my early 30s, I went through a big divorce, and wanted to start doing things I'd always talked about, but was always too lazy, timid, or busy to do. I wanted to start backpacking, but didn't know where to start. So after some internet searching, I joined a local hiking group that was run by an experienced backpacker. She had a sub-backpacking group, but she required you to go out on a few group hikes first, so she could judge just how safe it would be to take you, as a member. So, on my first car camping trip with the group, I packed out like it would be on a backpacking trip. No creature comforts, only food I could cook in my little camping stove. Test the weight of my gear while hiking in altitude, etc. My plan was to feel it all out in a rather safer environment. I was a single, smallish woman, and I didn't know what the dangers were. I could never imagine backpacking alone, but I wanted to at least be able to hold my own with friends someday, and I love the outdoors. So, the first night there, I staked out my way to a big 4-person tent that weighed like 8 pounds, and tucked away by a bare canister. I was feeling so proud of myself for the hike that afternoon. I had done it all with my backpack on, and my first use of my really cool new water filter. Yep, I felt like a badass. And getting my tent up without looking like a total noob. Well, about 2 a.m., I woke up to sounds of heavy breathing right outside my tent. I couldn't see a shadow because it was so dark, but it instantly froze me with fear. Up to this point, I could count the number of times I'd ever been camping. It was like 3, maybe 20 years before. But I knew heavy breathing was not a normal night sound. I was rigid and still. I barely breathed. I listened, and was like that until I thought I heard a small rustle. A movement, and then quiet. I was like, maybe it moved. I thought it was a bear or a largish animal. It didn't sound big enough to be a bear, but the breathing was so loud and deep. In the quiet, I considered creeping over to the flap and just opening it up to take a look. My logical brain was telling me that no animal was going to stay outside my tent if I started making noise, but I was just too terrified. Even though I went out there with others for safety. But before I could reach the flap, I heard it start to snore, and I laid right back down rigid as a board. For 2 hours I stayed like that. I last looked at my watch at 4 a.m., and then I fell asleep till light. The next day, I told my carpool buddies, and they literally laughed at me. Said it was probably a large dog from another camp looking for a warm place to sleep. I never looked, so I'll never know, but it sounded way bigger than a dog. Also, I actually did become a pretty skilled backpacker and peak bagger. I got into lightweight backpacking and loved high-altitude stuff. That led to a year of training in rock climbing. That divorce was good for me. Written by Opening Thought 5736. The 48-Hour Finder's Intuition. More times than I can count, I will suddenly know precisely where some lost item is that I've been searching for. I don't mean things I put down and left in some obvious way, like my glasses on a table or something. I mean an item truly and well lost. As in it fell down a bin it doesn't belong in a room it doesn't belong in, with items it doesn't belong with, that sort of thing. Somewhere no one would imagine it could be, or where someone would look for it. Even after tearing the house apart for days, it will strike me out of nowhere. I'll walk right to the location, dig down in the bin or under the guest bed or whatever, and put my hand right on it. Boom. It's gotten to where I can lose things and search high and low for them for several days. I make an elaborate ritual of simply giving up the search, because I know in 24 to 48 hours it will come to me precisely where the item is. I've realized my mom also had this capability, because I remember her saying things like, "In a couple days I'll put my hand right on it, and I'm not going to worry about it until then." Which I didn't understand at the time, but now I totally get. Sure, it could be my subconscious revealing to me some place that I saw it out of the corner of my eye previously, I suppose. But that's not been the nature of my experience. Case file number 2043, written by Trouble Kid. Seamstress Smile, House in Exile. Every day, I walk my dog around my neighborhood. Since it's a route I always take, I know the houses I pass. Yesterday, I was walking my dog and I passed a different house. I found it strange at first, but nothing that caught my attention. The house was old, I could see inside, and there was a seamstress working. The car parked in the garage was also old. She had a very sweet dog who came to greet my dog at the gate. Today, when I went for a walk with my dog again, I couldn't wait to pass the house again and see the nice lady and our good boy. That's when the unexpected happened. Instead of the house, there was a completely different one. What happened? Where did it go? How does a house disappear? Case file number 2044, written by Morning Petrichor. Head to toe, when rain's a no-show. When we were teens, we decided to camp near a local lake. However, neither of us had ever camped before, and we had none of the necessary supplies. We ended up using this dinky, super small tent that was not made for 2 people. It was so cramped that we were hunched over and constantly bumping elbows, but we managed to fall asleep pretty easily in the night. It's important to note that we fell asleep side by side with our heads next to each other. When we woke up the next morning, I had somehow turned 180 degrees so that my head was at my friend's feet. We were a little surprised because the tent was too small for us to move around when we were awake, let alone when we were asleep, but we shrugged it off because it wasn't that big of a deal. I went to check the time on my phone. This was before the rise of iPhones, so I had a basic slider phone, and noticed that my phone's recording app had turned on sometime during the night. If you've ever had an old school cell phone, you know just how difficult it is to access apps. It requires a lot of navigation and clicking. So I was in disbelief that I had somehow turned it on in my sleep. It had been going for at least 6 hours. We checked various points in the recording to see if it had captured evidence of my sleepwalking episode, maybe shuffling or my voice. But the only thing we could hear was the extremely loud sound of rain hitting the top of our nylon tent. This went on for pretty much the entire recording. Disappointing, but again, not that out of the ordinary. It was time to pack our things and go on with our day. But this is when we experienced the most unnerving part of our camping trip. When we opened our tent, the ground was completely dry. Not just relatively dry for the morning after a night's rain, but dry, like the ground at the peak of summer when it hasn't rained for a week. Case file number 2045, written by Mumu Lebeau, Verona's Vigil, Sleep's Peril. I was traveling through Verona on my way down to Cinque-Terre. It was a warm night, and I found out that Madame Butterfly was playing at the open-air opera house. So I decided to go see it. Then I was going to stop at Lake Garda and sleep in the back of my SUV until morning, then press on. But after the show, it was 11 p.m., and I was walking back to my car and exhausted. The drive was about an hour or so, but I could barely keep my eyes open. I was parked in a wealthy area and in a well-lit spot on the street, so I thought I'd jump in the back, sleep for an hour or two before driving to Lake Garda in the morning. I fell into a heavy, deep sleep for about an hour, and while I was sleeping, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I had a shiver down my body, and I shot awake, and my body was full of adrenaline. Like my body knew something was wrong before I woke up. I turned and saw a man, head on the glass, cupping the light from his eyes, looking in the window. I knew he couldn't see me, as the tent was so dark. Likely he was sussing out if there was anything in the car he could steal. I watched as he started to walk away, met his friend, then they paused. He said something to the other, and they both walked quickly back to the car. He raised his fist at the same window and was about to smash it, when I banged and screamed at it from the inside. It scared the crap out of him, and he was thrown back before they ran off. I jumped in the driver's seat and drove off. I read there is a part of your brain that is hypersensitive to unusual noise at night, and it's extremely aware of new surroundings, which is why you tend to have horrible sleep in new places. Some veritable spidey sense going on there. Nice. Case file number 2046, written by Future Government 8100. Left, left, right. What a sight. The other day, I was visiting my parents' house for a weekly family dinner. Typically, I will take off my 3-year-old's shoes when we walk in, so that he doesn't lose them throughout the house. However, this time, I did not do that, so his shoes ultimately got lost. At the end of the night, when I was trying to locate the shoes, I had found one for his left foot. As my family and I were searching the house for the right shoe, my dad says that he found it and handed over another shoe, except For this one, it is also a left shoe. I thought that maybe this was an old shoe. He had an identical pair of shoes in a smaller size. I thought that one of them must be a size 8, and the other one was a size 10. When I checked the sizes, however, they were both size 10. I was so confused. One of my sisters ended up finding the right shoe so that we could go home, but it left me wondering, where did that other left foot size 10 shoe come from? Did it duplicate? Case file number 2047, written by Fabulous Ferrochemist. Old games, old clothes, old secrets exposed. I was exploring the area behind my house shortly after we moved in. The area back then had once been a small quarry that had since filled with water. It was a pit of a pond that supposedly went straight down 60 feet if you stepped into it. I was walking along the edge and I came across a backpack filled with old video game cartridges and a set of clothing just laying on the ground. They were for the N64, and we found this around 2004, so they were outdated. Next to it was a set of clothing. The clothes were laying on the ground, spread out, pants and shirt, so it looked like someone laying down. They looked like they'd been there a long time. Same with the backpack. I told my parents, and they called the cops. There had been no reports of missing children or anything in the area. We never got an explanation, but it was weird. I don't think it was a prank. While we were new to the neighborhood, we were renters. Also, most of the neighbors were elderly. This happened in a rural Virginia town, and I can't imagine anyone wasting cartridges like that since most kids were lucky to have an N64. No adults or children had been reported by families or the neighborhood as missing, not for years. They never searched the quarry because they never had any reason to think there was something wrong. My sister and I went out there every day for a year or so and just avoided that spot because it was creepy. As far as I know, they're still out there. Case file number 2048, written by Gully F. A Note of Birth, a Miracle in Earth. Years ago, when my wife was pregnant with our second child and about to give birth, my mom came to stay with us for a few days to help take care of our oldest child. One early evening, Mom asked for a pen, paper, and an envelope. When I gave them to her, she wrote on the paper, sealed it in the envelope, and gave it to me, saying, "Put this in your pocket and don't open it. You'll know when," she said. 30 minutes later, my wife announced it was time to go to the hospital. She was in labor. So we did. And about 9 hours later, our second daughter was born at 3:45 a.m. She weighed 8 pounds 11 ounces and was 20 inches long. This being pre-cell phone days, I called my mom from the hospital to tell her the news. She answered the phone and immediately said, "Before you say anything, open the envelope." I did. It said, "Girl, 3:45 a.m., 8 pounds 11 ounces, 20 inches. I kept that paper for years. When my mom died, I went to our document safe where we kept it, but it was gone. Somehow that made me tear up a bit. Case file number 2049, written by Effective Scholar 68, A Neighbor's Bike Ride to Destiny. When I started learning to drive, I was good at doing long stretches of road. So when I had a party at my friend's house 50 minutes from where I live, my mom and I thought it would be good practice. To clarify, I live in a tiny village in a rural area. There's probably around 200 people in my village, and it's mostly old people who don't drive. Where I was driving to was a pretty small town, and as I mentioned, it's about a 50-minute drive. I was driving with my mom, and we stopped at a petrol station. But as I was quite new at driving, me and my mom switched seats when we were done to pull out of the station. Then after another 10 minutes, we pulled into a slip road to switch back so that my friend could see me pull up to her house. Nice. As we were only 5 minutes from arriving, my mom has lived in the area her whole life and never once gone into the slip, as it's quite out of the way and in a residential area close to my friend's house. 2 days later, I couldn't find my debit card, and I assumed I lost it at the party or in the petrol station. In the morning, I was on my banking app about to order a new card when my next door neighbor walks in and says, "This is really weird, but I was biking to the town and had to pull into a slip road, and I found a card on the floor with your name on it. It had fallen out of my car 50 minutes away from where I live, somewhere I'd never been before, and somehow my neighbor brought it to me?" Case file number 2050, written by Just Joshing 09. Asparagus Fumes and a Chicken's Doom. I had just moved into a new apartment and was cooking dinner. Chicken breast, asparagus, and rice, all on the stovetop. Asparagus can get extremely smoky. Add to that an overly sensitive smoke alarm, and you get a shrill alarm screaming at you with a bunch of half-cooked dinner on the stove. So I did what anyone would do with 2 pans in their hands and an alarm going off. I flailed wildly and tossed the chicken off into the distance. Now I know for a fact that all the windows were closed and there were no hidden nooks. But hard as I looked after I quieted down the alarm, I couldn't ever find that missing half-cooked chicken breast. There was never any smell of rotting meat either. It just disappeared into a portal, never to be seen again. Case file number 2051, Hot Poodle. A carol, a crisis, and a cosmic coincidence. Back at university, we had to take a bus into the nearest city. A lot of us bought annual bus passes, which had a photo of you on it to save the fare. One Christmas, we got the bus in to go and listen to the carol singing at the cathedral. Get off the bus, walk 20 minutes to the cathedral, stick around for an hour, and then walk 20 minutes back to the bus stop. When we get to the bus stop, my friend realizes she's lost her bus pass. We then walk 20 minutes back to the cathedral, checked there but no luck. Accepting defeat, we walk back to the bus stop. There's a big queue, and we see the next bus pull in. We're discussing the missing bus pass, and I look up at the top deck of the bus from the queue, and see someone looking down through the window holding something. I look at my friend and point. The person on the bus holds up the bus pass. Then we nod enthusiastically. They open the window and drop her pass down, and it is definitely her missing bus pass. There's so many of these buses running each night, so the fact that we timed our return, after going and coming back, with the same bus we took originally, and someone happened to spot the bus pass in the seats, and look down at me while we queued and I registered what they had found, is crazy to me. We couldn't believe our luck. Case file number 2052, written by Kindly Aggravating, Maine's Glow in the Dark, Fear in the Heart. When I was young, my parents and I relocated across the country to Maine. We lived in a very small town, and our house was old, beat up, and on many acres deep in the forest. It had 2 stories, with the top story being the main level, and the bottom story being the bedroom level. My bedroom had several large windows that looked out into the forest. I don't remember having curtains or blinds, but I'm sure I must have, because my mother never forgot details like that when decorating my bedrooms as a child. But I must have left them open one night. I remember waking up in darkness with a faint glowing orb of light hovering just outside my window. I watched it in utter terror as it went slowly across one window and then the next, before pausing, flashing briefly into my bedroom, before shifting into the third and final window and disappearing altogether. I was so upset by the ordeal that I went and woke my parents up, and my stepfather stormed the backyard with his gun in hand. There was nothing and no sign of the strange orb. My eyes are watering as I write this. Deep down, as an adult looking back, I realize that orb was anything but magic. It was probably someone's flashlight. It never happened again, but I'm still afraid of having window blinds open at night. You never know what's lurking. Case file number 2053, written by Pine Tree Noodles, George Washington's Blonde Fear. I was driving home from work on a long, somewhat dark road. I'll admit I was tired and cold and just wanted to get home. Speed limit was 60 miles per hour, and I was doing closer to 70. Suddenly, a girl with long blonde hair a black coat with brown fur on the hood and jeans, just showed up in front of my car. I knew there was another car to my left up ahead, but it was all black. All I saw was that it had stopped before I saw her. I managed to maneuver around her. I was freaked out. I turned to a side street and stopped to figure out what was happening. Then a tall guy with a black coat and short hair gets out of the driver's side of the stopped car, grabbed her, dragged her to the car while she was fighting him, and put her back in the car. I called the police and gave them the description of the car and the direction it took off in. I never heard anything about it, and I have not stopped thinking about her since. Just in case anyone is curious or could even know something, the location was Lincoln, Rhode Island, US, next to the high school, in January or February 2019. The car was a new black sports, maybe car, with the taillight going all the way across the back of the car. George Washington Highway. Case file number 2054, written by Clove, Winter Whispers, and a Flat Hat of Horror. I was an RA when I was in college. All the RAs would come back a week before the winter semester started for training, which meant no students were back in the dorm. We were the only ones in the building. One night, I heard the door to my shared bathroom open. The sound of the doorknob turning woke me up, so I kind of groggily said my suite mate's name. Then I realized my suite mate was on an extended holiday in Italy, so no one should have been in our suite at all. I immediately shot up and looked toward the bathroom door. It was almost pitch black in my room, but next to the bathroom door, I could see the perfect outline of a human face wearing a flat-brimmed hat. I couldn't see the details of the face, but I could see the shadows, where the eyes, the mouth, and the nose would have been. It was as if someone was standing next to the door, staring at me. I had no idea what to do, because no one was back in the dorms. I knew that the nearest RA was 2 floors away and wouldn't hear me scream for help. I stared at the face for a few seconds, and it stares back. Then I shifted slightly on the bed, and it completely disappeared. I got up to check the door, and it had been closed the whole time. It's been almost 7 years, and it still freaks me out when I think about it. Case file number 2055, written by Avion Chef. News of the dead, words left unsaid. Was delivering newspapers on my paper route when a longtime customer pulled his car next to me and asked me to just give him his daily newspaper now because he was going on a long trip. I handed him his newspaper, then skipped his house as I continued my route. The next day, I was collecting the weekly fees. You used to have to go collect the money back then. No internet payment yet. And I went to his house to collect my fee. His wife answers and promptly complains that I missed her house on my deliveries the day before. I explained to her that her husband had pulled up next to me and asked for it. I told her what he had said and that I gave him the paper. She started crying, told me that he had died a couple weeks ago. It was obviously not possible that I spoke with her husband the day before. I know what I saw, and nearly 30 years later, I still think about that situation. I have no way to logically explain what happened, and it still gives me the creeps. Case file number 2056, written by Moby's What Now? Nature's Preserve and a Buck's Nerve. So, my car broke down when my mom and I were driving through a heavily wooded nature preserve. I had to pee so bad that I told my mom I would walk to the nearest ranger station and get help while also getting to pee. Unfortunately, the rangers were gone, and so I had to walk back and tell my mom the crap news. On my way back from the station, it had just gone dark, and I could barely see past the road into the tree line. I was really freaked out because I was close enough that I should have been able to see the car from where I was walking, but it wasn't there. All of a sudden, I hear this really heavy breathing. I turned and this buck was just walking beside me every single step he followed. I was so terrified because I've heard of people getting hurt by bucks, especially if you're in their territory or something. But this buck just kept following me like he was protecting me. I finally got back to where the car was supposed to be and it was gone. My mom wasn't there now, and I'm really panicking. I'm alone except for a big buck, and it's so dark that I can't make it back to the station. Just as I'm about to start sobbing, the deer makes a huge huff, and suddenly I see headlights. Somehow my mom had got the car started and drove to the station to pick me up. I looked back to the deer, and it was crashing through the forest before the car could get to me. I just couldn't believe it. Case file number 2057, written by Let's Flay, The Red Trimmed Nightmare. My girlfriend and I are in a long-distance relationship. We typically take turns traveling between each other's countries, Australia and Canada. About 2 years ago, it was my turn to travel over to Australia to stay with her and her mom. For a bit of background, my girlfriend's room was built as an extension and add-on to the garage. So to get to it, you had to walk through the garage to get to her room. About a couple weeks into my trip over there, I wake up at around 1 a.m. and the room is just glowing red. I look up at the ceiling and I see this black figure crawling through the ceiling. It moved in such an inhuman way, almost like it was breaking every one of its bones to move. I start screaming, which wakes my girlfriend up, and she looks up at the ceiling and starts to scream as well. Instinctively, I grab my pillow and whip it at the figure. The next thing I know, everything went black, and I'm waking up a few hours later. My girlfriend is fast asleep, so I think it was just some weird dream. At that point, I have to go to the washroom. So I walk through the garage and try to quietly open the garage door to get into the main house. Previously, her mom had mentioned that she was getting annoyed with us, staying up late at night and going through the garage door to use the washroom. Since her mom's room was down the garage door hallway, each time we would open it, the door would click loudly and wake her up. So I'm standing there at the garage door and I try to open it as quietly as possible. As I turn the handle and the door clicks as I push it open, her mom just starts screaming at the top of her lungs. I thought it was out of rage for waking her up, so I immediately close the door and quickly walk back to my girlfriend's room. I climb into bed and gently nudge her awake to tell her that her mom is screaming. She gets up and goes to see whether her mom was still angry and tries to de-escalate the situation. About 20 minutes goes by and my girlfriend comes back into the room completely silent. She asks me if I saw the room glowing red earlier, as well as a figure in the ceiling. I say yes, and she goes wide-eyed and says that she thought it was just a dream too. She then says that her mom wasn't screaming at me. Apparently, when I opened the door, it did wake her up. But when she woke up, there was a black figure standing at the foot of her bed and it was slowly moving towards her. She then experienced a blackout as well and was woken up by my girlfriend checking in on her. Yeah, the entire house slept with lights on from then on. Now time for the dad jokes of the day. Just opened 3 birthday cards and so far I have $80. I love being a postman. I think that's a felony. Joke number 2. I bought my wife a mood ring. It turns black when she's annoyed. Not sure if it turns any other colors. Uh-oh. Joke number 3. The president typically pardons a turkey, but this year he's pardoning a hunter. Hey, this one's really good. Political, but nice. Joke number 4. 2 atoms are walking down the street together. One says, "Oh no, I think I've lost an electron." To which the other replies with, "Are you positive?" Joke number 5. Which rock group has 4 men who can't sing? Mount Rushmore. They are rocky indeed. Like the video, subscribe, hit the bell. Kinetic Symphony signing off.